Hello, welcome back. Hopefully by the time this video is loaded, it will be Happy New Year. I tried to shoot this video 3 times now, and for some reason something keep going wrong, get interrupted, phone calls, so I keep having to redo it. Anyhow, this video is, I'm not sure if it falls under any specific category, but I think it's a fun story to tell. For those that watch many of my videos, you most likely have seen my first comic books, the Iron Man 150. I bought that comic book in 1981, and when I bought it, I lived in Albany, New York, on the street named New Scotland Avenue. Okay, New Scotland Avenue was a fairly decent street in a decent part of Albany. We live in an apartment there, and the only thing I didn't like about New Scotland Avenue was the hospital. There's a hospital about 7 blocks away from our apartment, and anyone that live near the hospital will understand that you hear the ambulance sound all the time at crazy hours of the night. So that's one of the things that I remember the most, and things that I didn't like about living on that street was almost nightly I can hear the sound of the ambulance driving by the apartment at 2 a.m. or some crazy hours to wake me up. We lived there for only about I would say 7 or 8 months, but that's where I got my first start as far as the hobby, collecting comic books. Anyhow, leap forward almost 20 years, okay, as I was buying comic books on eBay, back issues. I stumbled across a listing that had a few books that I wanted to buy. I would have bought if I saw it earlier, but it expired, the auction's finished. It was some decent looking Silver Age books as well as Golden Age books. So this is what I used to do and still do today. Whenever I see a seller that have books that look decent and potentially have many more books based on what they're listing, I will contact the seller just to give them a heads up that I am interested in buying the books, and if they plan to list more, just give me a heads up, because I don't want to spend all day on eBay, keep a watch on what they're listing. So if they plan to list something next week, just let me know and I will bookmark, save their information, and then check out the listing in a week or so. So that's all. I rarely trying to solicit them to sell me anything directly, because for all I know, I don't know who the heck they are. So I don't want to bypass eBay and then get scammed. So that's a policy that I always do. So I contacted this seller and expressed my interest in future listings, and she emailed me back and she's like, well, these are not my book. Hopefully you're okay with my listing, because I'm not a grader. I don't know how to grade comic books. I give as many pictures as possible, and her pictures were very good. I can tell you that the one of the things that caught my attention on her listing was the abundance amount of pictures at all different angles, and very clear, very big. And you're talking about eBay's in the early days, so it's rare to see that much information given by the sellers. And I told her it's okay. The pictures are decent enough for me to make my own decision on what grades those books can be. But she told me that she's not. It's not her books. She is selling it for a friend, and she also have a bunch of listings in a blog somewhere else. And if I'm interested in buying some of the other listings she has, go ahead and check out the blog. So I went to the blog, and sure enough, there was a bunch of Conan magazines and a bunch of other comic books, but mostly low grade stuff. Back then, I didn't collect magazine yet, so I had no interest in buying the Conan magazines from her. But I read the blog, and the blog mentioned the owner of the books as someone that grew up collecting in upstate New York. So I thought that was interesting. So I emailed her back and told her that, hey, I went to the blog. There's nothing there I'm interested in buying right now, but I thought it was interesting that your friend that are selling the books live in upstate New York. That's where I grew up also. And from that, she normally would ask, so where did you live? Albany, New York, I told her, and right away she replied back and told me that, wow, and what a coincidence, my friend that had these comic books and us, her and her husband today. Back then they were like teenagers, they are about 5-10 years older than me. But she's like, we all grew up in Albany. And that's where it get really funny, because I'm like, so we both of us were like, wow, what a small world. We all live in Albany, grew up in Albany. They literally grew up in Albany compared to me. I only lived in Albany for less than 2 years altogether. So but the next logical question that we asked was, so where did you live in Albany? And simultaneously, she sent an email, I sent an email, and bang, New Scotland Avenue. Can you believe it? What a small world. It turns out they live on New Scotland Avenue, about 4 blocks away from where I live, for a long time. They lived there for many years, and we had a fun chat about the hospital and all the noise and all that stuff. And it was bizarre to bump into somebody literally almost 20 years later that lived on the same street. And it turns out David is the name of the collector. So now David is about 10 years older than me and started to collect comic books about 10 years earlier. So his first comic book was like, in 71, 72. And at the time, he was not into selling his entire collection. He was just interested in selling some Silver Age and magazine stuff that he no longer wanted to keep. And so, we built a friendship from all these emails over the years. And at the time, he said, well, I don't have much else I plan to sell, but I do have some DC horror, Western, war titles that I don't want. If you want them, you can have them. I can sell them to you. So I wasn't collecting those titles either, but I told him, why not? I don't collect those titles either. This is, over 10 years ago. So back then I was still mostly in the superheroes titles. And he took a few pictures. They look pretty good, at least very fine plus on the average. Some book was probably in a near mint condition, but the reason why they were in such good shape, based on what he told me, was he buy some DC stuff, but he wasn't really into reading them. So for the most part, most of these books was bought and put away. Some were read maybe once or twice by his friends. But as far as him, not once. and they were not even in bags and board. They were all just like tossed in the box. And so, after exchanging some pictures, we agreed on the price. It was something like half guide, something like that, based on the condition. I sent him a check. He shipped me the box, and but before he did that, I did ask him politely to, like, can you bags and board them? I have a couple hundreds, if not thousands, of bags and board at home that I can send to you, and please bags and board them for me. And that's what I did. I shipped 400 bags and board to him, and he then bags and board them and shipped the books to me. So it's so if you have seen the DC war books that I shown, the Our Army at War, those books came from his collection. And hopefully in the future I will have more videos that showcase more of the books from David's collection. Anyhow, so I bought that. It was a couple hundred books. And after that, we maintained a friendship. We exchanged email here and there, talking about life. He was interested in my story as an immigrant coming to America and all that stuff. Living the American dreams. And so we built a pretty good friendship. And I really never inquire to buy other stuff from him, but he did hint to me that somewhere down the road he will sell his other books, and he will let me know whenever that is. And I let it be. I never once inquire or nag him to sell me more books. And then about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, in one of our email exchange, he's asked me, do you want to buy some more books from me? Naturally I said sure. It's been so long since we have a deal between each other, but sure, if you have something you want to sell, let me know. And he sent me pictures of the Hulk 180 and the Hulk 181, as well as a bunch of other books. If you go to my earliest videos and you see a video with the Hulk 180 and 181 and how nice they were, that's his book. And he sent me the pictures and they look gorgeous. Okay, so what I did was I went onto eBay. I linked him to a bunch of books that was in the near mid range as far as price wise, and I told him, listen, this is what the going rate is for these books. This is how much I'm willing to pay, a fair value for them. And he was like, wow, that's crazy, that's seemed too much. Let's do this. Let me send you the books. You examine the books, and if you think they are worth what you think they are, then go ahead, write me a check. If not, you can either return the books or make a lower offer. I'm fine with that. So that just gives you an idea of the relationship David and I had. Okay, he had no problem dropping the Hulk 181 along with the 180 and other books in the mail to me without worrying about being scam or rip off. So I received the books. They look great. I wrote the check for the agreed amount, and he was very happy with the deal. I was very happy with the deal. He was still surprised that I was willing to pay that much for those books. So after that deal, about 6 months later, he once again tell me, Nick, you bought a lot of my DC books so far, but there are a lot left that I think you would love to have. And I knew he was a big Neil Adams fan from our many conversations. So I was hoping that he would say something about his Neil Adams collection, and sure enough, he said, it's time for me to let go of my Neil Adams DC cover collection, superhero related. And I was like, wow, let me have it. So over the next couple of days, he sent me hundreds of pictures, from Superman, Detective, Batman, World Finest, Superboy, Lois Lane, Wonder Woman, you name it. It was just insanity, okay? And once again, we worked out a good deal, a fair deal for both sides, where I was able to offer him a good value for books that were, for the most part, in a very fine to near mid range. And once again, I shipped him a whole bunch of bags and board for him to put them in, because once again, most of them never were put in bags and board. How can this be? How can this book stay this fresh, this white 30 years later without bags and board? Okay, unbelievable. Unfortunately, this was before my time of joining YouTube. But if I did an unboxing with that big box of Neil Adams DC superhero books, it would have been insane. Trust me, it would have been completely insane, because this is just before I joined YouTube. So this happened, around Christmas time of last year. And I remember opening the big box and just completely floored by the beauties of it. And just to give you an example of how nice those books were, the majority of my Neil Adams Green Lantern, Green Arrow books, outside of the nice looking Green Lantern 76, for the most part, the rest of those books was his. Okay, so can you imagine those books staying that nice for 30 plus years without bags and board? Wow. So hopefully over the next few years, I will show off a few more of those books from that box, because there are so many titles, from Detective, Batman, Flash, you name it. Just about everything that Neil Adams did for DC in the Bronze Age were in that box. I bought everything under the sun. I didn't care. Some books were low grade, but at least half the books was in the very fine to near mid range. So I gladly bought all of those books from him. So that's my one interesting story of how David and I grew up on the same street, and years later I was able to buy a lot of the gems in my collection today from him. So big thank you to him. And I did promise him that those books will stay in my collection for years, if not decades to come. So so far so good. Like I said, I sold about 25% of the war horror western books over the years, but the bulk of the higher grade books are still in my possession. So it's good that they are in good hands. Anyhow, I hope the story was not too boring for you, and if you make it this far, thanks for watching, and until next time.